Observe a combatant armed with a rapid-fire weapon in the year 1942. Now consider a soldier equipped with a similar firearm in the year 2025. Do you discern any distinction in the instruments they wield? Have you ever pondered the enduring legacy of the infamous MG-42, its persistent presence on ostensibly modern battlefields, and its remarkable refusal to fade into obsolescence? If these questions resonate with you, prepare to uncover the truth through the authentic narrative of a firearm that has been exhaustively dissected by historical accounts. Let us commence. The lineage of the MG-42 can be traced back to the MG-08. Therefore, we shall begin our exploration there and progress to its current standing. Upon examining the MG-08 and the MG-42, one would readily perceive a significant divergence. The MG-08 was a water-cooled variant of the Maxim gun, a pivotal development from the First World War that revolutionized combat by enabling sustained volleys of fire. However, the geopolitical landscape shifted, and the Germans understood that the forthcoming conflict would not be confined to static trench warfare as in the preceding era. They were actively developing the now celebrated Blitzkrieg doctrine, which necessitated a weapon capable of supporting advancing infantry with substantial automatic firepower. Consequently, the 80-pound MG-08, expelling approximately 500 rounds per minute, was inadequate for this evolving tactical paradigm. It is worth noting that the MG-08 saw service throughout the entire war, primarily in secondary or defensive roles for the German forces. During the years preceding the Second World War, German engineers engaged in clandestine development of a new machine gun. Prohibited from advancing their arsenal following the devastation of the First World War, they were compelled to operate discreetly. Their initial endeavor resulted in the MG-13, a considerably lighter, air-cooled machine gun designed for portability by a single soldier. It incorporated the nascent quick-change barrel mechanism, eschewing the cumbersome water-filled jacket. Instead of a heavy tripod, it featured a bipod mounted near the muzzle. These innovations represented groundbreaking advancements for their time and would profoundly influence the subsequent MG-42. The most substantial drawback, and the primary reason for the MG-13's discontinuation, was its ammunition feed. It utilized a 25-round magazine rather than belts. With a firing rate of approximately 600 rounds per minute, this provided merely 2.5 seconds of sustained fire before requiring a reload, rendering sustained suppressive fire impractical. 4 years elapsed before a genuine breakthrough emerged, the legendary and often underestimated MG-34. This weapon is recognized as the world's inaugural general-purpose machine gun. It was belt-fed, equipped with a quick-change barrel system, constructed from high-grade military-grade components, and fired at an astonishing 900 rounds per minute, a 50% increase over its predecessors. The advent of the MG-34 unequivocally positioned it as the premier and most advanced machine gun globally. No other nation possessed anything remotely comparable in its features. It was integrated into tanks and various vehicles, sported specialized sights for aerial engagements, and was employed on aircraft for dogfights and ground attacks. Naturally, it also served with distinction in infantry roles, both offensively and defensively. It could be deployed from a bipod, fired from the hip, carried by an assistant gunner, or, most ingeniously, utilized with the Lafette mount. This mount, in itself, is a marvel of engineering and warrants further elaboration. Believe me, it is truly remarkable. Despite its exceptional capabilities, the MG-34 presented certain challenges. These were less inherent flaws of the weapon itself and more a consequence of the nation producing it. Indeed, it was susceptible to dust, grit, and extreme cold, necessitating diligent cleaning and lubrication by the gunners to ensure operational readiness. However, this was not the primary impetus for the Germans to seek a successor in its younger brother. The MG-34 was, in essence, a luxury weapon, meticulously crafted from premium materials through a precise and intricate manufacturing process demanding specialized expertise. The construction of a single MG-34 required approximately 150 man-hours and cost around 320 Reichsmarks, equivalent to roughly $3,000 in contemporary currency. The inherent issue arose when the demand escalated to hundreds of thousands of these weapons to sustain operations across multiple fronts and continents. Even prior to the war, German engineers had been experimenting with more cost-effective and efficient manufacturing methods, employing stamped steel to reduce both production time and expense without compromising performance. Imagine the challenge, tasked with engineering an improvement upon the world's finest machine gun while simultaneously halving its cost and production duration. This is precisely the undertaking that German engineers accomplished, giving rise to the MG-42. Fabricated from stamped steel as intended, it boasted a 30% higher rate of fire, an accelerated quick-change barrel mechanism, enhanced reliability in adverse battlefield conditions, and, astonishingly, required only half the production time of the MG-34, all while reducing the unit cost by approximately 80 Reichsmarks. This represents a truly formidable achievement. Upon finalization of the design, mass production commenced swiftly, and throughout the war, over 400,000 MG-42s were manufactured. Nevertheless, it never entirely supplanted the MG-34 due to several factors. Firstly, retooling factories already engaged in MG-34 production would have necessitated a halt in the output of urgently needed machine guns. Secondly, the MG-34 was the designated armament for tanks, serving as a hull or coaxial machine gun, a role the MG-42 was ill-suited for. This limitation stemmed from their divergent barrel-changing systems. To replace the barrel on an MG-34, one had to disengage the barrel housing, rotate it, and extract the heated barrel from the rear. A fresh barrel would then be inserted and secured. The MG-42, conversely, featured a more streamlined and rapid system. The barrel was released from the side, extracted with a single motion, a new barrel inserted and locked into place. This maneuver was impractical within the confined confines of a tank turret without a complete redesign. Consequently, when an MG-42 was observed on a tank, it was typically mounted externally, such as atop the commander's cupola, for supplementary anti-infantry or anti-aircraft defense. The Germans maintained parallel production of both machine gun models throughout the war, necessitating a continuous supply of spare parts for the hundreds of thousands of MG-34s already in service. At this juncture, they possessed a machine gun capable of expending rounds at more than double the rate of any Allied weapon. Thus, we can now address those frequently recounted facts and myths. Its firing rate was so extreme that the individual rounds were indistinguishable, creating a continuous, terrifying sound that demoralized Allied soldiers. And it was allegedly capable of bisecting a man, earning it the moniker Hitler's Buzzsaw, and so forth. To be clear, many of these assertions hold truth. My personal admiration, however, lies more with the ingenious and largely unacknowledged engineering that underpinned and surrounded this weapon, rendering those dramatic epithets and legends plausible. Were it not for its exceptional quality, this firearm would not still be in service today, albeit in slightly modified forms. Now imagine its prowess in 1942, when it faced no global competition. Upon its initial deployment in 1942, it was immediately recognized by Allied forces, who swiftly came to regard it with apprehension, and for good reason. The MG-42 operated from an open bolt, enhancing cooling efficiency and preventing premature firing or cook-off of rounds in the chamber after sustained firing. Its mechanism employed a short recoil operation with a roller-locked bolt. In essence, the barrel and bolt recoil together after discharge. Two roller bearings arrested the barrel's forward travel after a few millimeters, allowing the bolt to continue its rearward motion. It would then extract the spent casing, chamber a new round from the belt, and fire upon locking. This cycle repeated at an exceptionally high velocity as long as the trigger remained depressed. The standard German ammunition was the potent 8x57mm Mauser cartridge, identical to that used in the Karabinier 98 infantry rifles. Machine guns, however, would occasionally employ a more powerful iteration of this ammunition, typically featuring tracer rounds every fifth cartridge in the belt, enabling the gunner to visually track the trajectory of their fire and adjust their aim onto the target. The ammunition belts were non-disintegrating, constructed from linked steel strips, initially in 50-round lengths, later joined into 250-round configurations for ammunition boxes, or even longer for vehicle or stationary emplacements. The Germans also utilized drum magazines attached to their machine guns, holding 50 rounds, which kept the belt clean and readily accessible, eliminating the need for soldiers to carry it draped around their necks or risk tripping over it, as was common among Allied troops. Furthermore, observe the German ammunition containers. They featured ingenious folding handles with leather grips for enhanced carrying comfort, ingeniously positioned to allow for the transport of two containers in a single hand, or folded to enable stacking of boxes where space was limited, such as within tanks or bunkers. These containers were also watertight, could be affixed to belts or attached to the Lafette tripod. Once again, the Allies possessed nothing comparable. It is fascinating to witness the extent of German ingenuity and their meticulous attention to detail in ensuring all components functioned harmoniously. The zenith of this integrated design was undoubtedly the Lafette tripod, which we must discuss before delving into the post-war fate of the MG-42. The operational careers of both the machine guns and their mounts expanded well beyond the conflicts for which they were initially designed. This is the Lafette 42, a specialized mount weighing approximately 45 pounds. While the Allies also employed heavy tripods, this design was fundamentally different. It was a stroke of genius, transforming a light machine gun into a formidable heavy weapon. The Lafette featured tubular steel legs supporting the central housing for the weapon. Two coiled buffer springs effectively absorbed the weapon's recoil, contributing to enhanced stability and accuracy. A separate trigger mechanism allowed the gunner to avoid the disruptive effects of vibrations during firing. It incorporated precise aiming controls and advanced optics, extending the weapon's effective range to 3,000 meters, rendering it capable of indirect fire, akin to light artillery. However, its most ingenious feature was the Tiefenfeuerautomat, a mechanical computer. This device functioned like a clockwork mechanism, allowing the gunner to preset two range limits and a desired sweep zone. Essentially, the gunner designated the area within which the machine gun would deliver fire, whether it be a road anticipated for enemy movement or a bridge to be secured or denied. When the trigger was activated, this mechanism would cause the weapon to traverse automatically across the pre-programmed field. Repeatedly pulling the trigger would initiate fire across this specified zone, and the gunner did not need to remain directly beside the weapon. A string could be attached to the trigger, allowing the operator to remain in cover while the gun continued to sweep the designated area as long as ammunition was available. The Lafette tripod was compatible with both the MG-34 and MG-42, representing one of the most overlooked aspects of German ordnance, significantly amplifying the effectiveness of their machine guns and transforming them into fully automatic precision weapons. Barrel changes were also facilitated when the weapon was mounted, and a well-trained crew could execute this task in as little as 3 to 4 seconds, resuming fire without significant interruption. In defensive positions, MG-42s, particularly when deployed with the Lafette mount, presented a terrifying obstacle to advancing Allied troops, not solely due to their rate of fire. Their low profile made them exceptionally difficult to detect and neutralize. The Germans were also masters of deception, employing tactics to create the illusion of greater force than they possessed. They would meticulously prepare multiple firing positions for each team. After engaging the enemy from one location for a period, they would relocate, switch positions, and resume firing from a different angle. This tactic proved immensely frustrating for the Allies, who found themselves under fire from multiple directions, leading them to believe they were facing a significantly larger enemy contingent. Compounding their difficulties, they lacked the intelligence to effectively direct artillery or tank fire to suppress these elusive machine gun nests. If compelled to retreat, German forces often inflicted devastating casualties upon Allied soldiers before withdrawing to a new position to repeat the process. This strategy was particularly prevalent in the later stages of the war as German forces fell back towards Berlin, making every Allied advance a costly ordeal in terms of human lives. A further German tactic involved the coordinated use of two machine guns. One weapon would fire tracer rounds high above Allied positions, creating the impression that fire was directed at rear echelons and potentially encouraging frontline units to advance. The second machine gun would then unleash devastating fire upon these exposed troops as they moved. For the German gunner, the expenditure of 20 rounds per second demanded exceptional trigger discipline for multiple reasons. Sustained firing could potentially damage the weapon, either through barrel overheating or catastrophic failure of the feeding mechanism, which, incidentally, occurred with considerable frequency, sometimes leading to the weapon's destruction in the gunner's hands. This extreme rate of fire was a double-edged sword, of course, leading to rapid ammunition depletion, necessitating a substantial logistical effort to supply sufficient rounds to sustain the hungry weapon. To maximize the potential of their machine guns, both the MG-34 and MG-42, which were deployed concurrently, the Germans organized their infantry squads around the machine gun itself. In contrast, the Allies tended to view machine guns as supplementary support for infantry, categorizing them into light, medium, and heavy classifications. The Germans achieved superior integration and effectiveness with a single weapon platform by their superior organizational structure. A standard German infantry squad comprised 10 soldiers. The core element was the machine gun team, the gunner, his assistant, and an ammunition bearer. These three individuals worked in close coordination around the weapon, managing all its associated equipment, ensuring smooth operation, and providing mutual support for firing adjustments, reloads, barrel changes, and repositioning. Should the gunner be incapacitated, the assistant would immediately assume command, continuing to deliver fire without hesitation. These three individuals were typically armed with 9mm pistols as sidearms. The remaining 6 soldiers were equipped with Karabiner 98 bolt-action rifles, tasked with ensuring the safety of the machine gun team, providing protection, or advancing under covering fire to secure objectives during offensive operations. The 10th member was the squad leader, usually a non-commissioned officer, armed with the renowned MP-40 submachine gun, responsible for commanding and directing the squad's actions and coordinating with other units. A horse or donkey was typically employed to haul a cart laden with ammunition, as the rapid expenditure of thousands of rounds was a considerable logistical challenge to manage solely by hand. A single 250-round box weighed approximately 8 kilograms, or about 20 pounds, and would be depleted in roughly 10 seconds of continuous firing, demanding extreme prudence during prolonged engagements. You might therefore inquire why, if the MG-42 was so exceptional, captured specimens were not widely adopted by the Allies, nor were they extensively replicated and integrated into Allied armies. In fact, they were utilized, and attempts were made to replicate them, though initially with limited success. Allied soldiers frequently employed captured German machine guns whenever the opportunity arose, particularly among partisan and resistance groups. It is often stated that the Germans would execute captured soldiers found using their machine guns. However, this was likely confined to isolated incidents. The fundamental challenge with employing an adversary's weapon lies in the lack of requisite training, maintenance expertise, and the critical absence of spare parts and ammunition. While capturing a supply could provide temporary relief, a consistent resupply was not feasible, and when a malfunction occurred, replacement parts were unavailable. Regarding replication, the United States did indeed attempt to reverse engineer captured MG-42s as part of the T-24 project. Two prototypes were constructed, rechambered for the American .3006 cartridge. However, technical challenges prevented them from achieving satisfactory operational performance, and they failed to match the formidable rate of fire of the original MG-42. The project was ultimately abandoned due to the considerable time and resources it consumed, which could have been better allocated to the production of firearms they were already proficient in manufacturing. This does not imply, however, that inspiration was not drawn from the weapon. Certain elements of the MG-42 were incorporated, along with the ergonomic design principles of the German FG-42 paratrooper rifle, ultimately contributing to the development of the M60 machine gun, believe it or not. Now we have thoroughly examined the MG-42's role during the Second World War. What transpired following Germany's surrender and the conclusion of the global conflict? Many weapons ceased their operational careers with the war's end, or in the subsequent years, but not this one. Primarily, significant stockpiles of MG-42s remained after Germany's disarmament, and these were acquired by numerous countries worldwide. Some nations proceeded to produce their own versions, such as the Yugoslavian M53, a direct replication of the MG-42 that remained in service for decades. Subsequently, when Germany realigned itself with NATO in the post-war era and required a new general-purpose machine gun to rearm its military, they evaluated contemporary British and American weaponry. Their assessment was unfavorable, concluding they already possessed a far superior design. Consequently, they repurposed their trusted MG-42s, modifying them for the new standard caliber, 7.62 by 51 mm NATO, and designated it the MG-1. It was essentially the same weapon as the MG-42, with only a new barrel and modifications for the different ammunition type. Remarkably, it continued to be more efficient and easier to produce than comparable weapons from other nations. In the ensuing years, the MG-1 underwent further refinement, incorporating a heavier bolt to reduce the rate of fire to a more manageable and economical, approximately 900 rounds per minute. This evolution led to the MG-3, featuring minor enhancements such as the adoption of the American disintegrating belt. However, the fundamental design principles of the weapon remained identical to its 1942 iteration, and it was subsequently adopted by some of the world's most advanced militaries. They even continue to utilize a Lafette-style mount, albeit enhanced with modern optics and fire control systems, essentially the same mechanism that transforms the MG-3 into an exceptionally lethal long-range weapon. It is still integrated into vehicles and tanks, now often within remotely operated turrets equipped with night vision and other advanced technologies.